for chapter 2 of Mice and Men. So, in this chapter, Steinbeck is kind of setting up all of the things that are going to be really important later on in the book. We're going to meet a bunch of new people, and we're going to meet the new ranch where the it's going to be set for the rest of the the story. And so this starts on page 18 in the PDF that you guys have. So in this section right here, we get an introduction to the bunkhouse, and we find out that it's not a very pretty place to live, and it's also not very clean. Um, it says here that they find a can that talks about killing lice. The bunks are all stacked on top of each other. The men put their stuff in apple crates. It's a workhouse. It's bare bones. There's no comfort there. The mattresses are made out of burlap. Some of them don't even have sheets or blankets over top. So, and it continues on. George and Lenny are kind of here, and they get introduced to Crooks, the stable buck, and he's going to be really important later on in the story. So here's a picture of him, and he's named Crooks because he's crooked. He's very literally crippled. He was kicked by a horse, the book says. And so he's also kind of bitter. The book says that he's kind of like he doesn't really hang out with the other guys, and he can't hang out with the other guys because he's black. And so he's not allowed in the bunkhouse. He's not allowed in the bunkhouse with the other men because he's black. So he's excluded. And so the men, they go in and they go, George and Lenny, they go to meet the boss. And one of the things that happens in this exchange between the two of them on, starting around page 23 is that the boss wants to know why George is speaking for Lenny. And he says, what are you trying to pull over here? And basically, what he thinks is that he's working Lenny, and then George is taking all of Lenny's money to spend for himself, which we know isn't true. But George, to kind of like get rid of the suspicion, lies a little bit and says that, Lenny was his cousin and he promised that he would take care of him. And so Steinbeck here is setting up George as Lenny's caretaker, and he's setting up Lenny as a vulnerable person. So, a recurring symbol that we're going to see in this book is Candy and his dog. And this is Candy, and this is Candy's dog. So, the thing that you should notice about both of them is that they're old. And Steinbeck is going to use old age as a theme, right? So what he wants you to see is that in this world, old people who have outlived their usefulness are kind of discarded. So they're going to talk about, Candy's dog, it can't eat, it smells bad, and they suggest just taking it out and shooting it. Now, Candy, if you're Candy and they want to take your old dog out and shoot it, you're probably thinking, well, I'm just as old as that dog is. And so, what do they think about me? But just pay attention to the interactions around Candy and his dog, because it's going to be really important as a foreshadow to things that happen later in the story. Okay. And then next we meet Curly. And Curly is a jerk. And he's going to be the closest thing that we have to a villain in this story. And he zeroes right in on Lenny and starts picking on him immediately. And just so you know how gross Curly is, his hand down here that's in this glove, it's said in the story that he keeps Vaseline in that glove to keep his hand moist for his wife, which is a disgusting idea. But this is Curly's wife, And Curly's wife is going to come in later in this chapter too and kind of say hello to all of the men in the bunkhouse, which is going to foreshadow a bunch of other things that are going to happen. So if you are Lenny, right? Lenny likes soft things. We know that he has a history with kind of being blamed for kind of assault of women. So just kind of like, and George warns Lenny about Curly's wife, saying to stay away from her. And so you can kind of piece together why that might be. The other thing that you need to know about Curly's wife is that in this book, Steinbeck's not a feminist. And Curly's wife, we don't ever get her name. She's just referred to as Curly's wife, which makes her seem much more like property than a person. And she's also kind of like trapped in the house. She's not allowed to go out. And we're going to get into kind of her tragic backstory a little bit later. And so, again, Steinbeck is just kind of setting up all of these foreshadows and different things. Like on this page where he says, look, Lenny, this here ain't no setup. I'm scared. You're going to have trouble with that Curly guy. I seen that kind before. He was kind of feeling you out. He figures he's got you scared and he's going to take a sock at you the first chance he gets, right? That's a foreshadow. And, of course, Lenny, he says, I don't want no trouble, George, and it's not going to be up to him whether or not he gets trouble. And George's advice to Lenny is if Curly picks a fight with you, just sock him. And, so again, Steinbeck is setting up all of these different conflicts. So you have Curly and his wife. You have a conflict between George and Lenny. You have a conflict between Candy and his old dog and the rest of the men. And you have all of this foreshadowing going on here that is going to set up the major events that happen later on in the book. Okay. And the good news is that this book is relatively short. And by the end of chapter 2, we're already a third of the way through it. So I hope you guys are enjoying it so far, and I'll see you at the end of chapter 3.